much as anybody I know. He hosts radio around here on Thursdays from 3 until 5. It is called the SSV on WNST. I'm petitioning him and positioning him to change it to the TSV, the Thursday Sports Voice. But it is a Sunday Sports Voice, now heard on Thursdays from 3 until 5. Dennis Koulatsos joins us here from Koons Ford Security Boulevard. Of all the people I know who love the draft and have always loved the draft, and Phil Savage would tell you that that's me, that I was the guy throwing draft parties back in the 90s, gathered around when Chris McAllister's coming off the board and Dwayne Starks. And all that's true, and I have all those old pictures that I shared over the weekend. But this thing gets bigger and bigger. There's more people like you and me every year based on the TV numbers, based on the outcome, and certainly in this city where you run a business, I run a business. They've had a problem with their business. That's been something we've talked about. They have reinvigorated the fan base, and they're in the business of hope right now. Art Modell used to always say that, Dennis Koulatsos, hope. And the Ravens have hope, right?
Yeah, they certainly do. I think drafting Lamar Jackson at the bottom of the first round, I thought that really went a long way towards re-energizing the fan base. I mean, not just the fan base here in Baltimore, but what was amazing to me was a late night, and 15, 30 minutes after the first round had ended, all the talking heads could talk about were the Ravens trading back to the bottom of that first round with the Philadelphia Eagles and selecting quarterback Lamar Jackson. I mean, they were buzzing, analyzing it to death. Was this a good move? Was this not a good move? But it definitely put the Ravens on the map.
I fell asleep, Dennis. I'm going to admit it to you. I fell asleep, and this is God's honest truth. I fell asleep on the 29th pick, okay, literally, and I woke up, and I swear to God, Lamar Jackson was like walking across the stage, and purple was up, and I like jumped out of bed, I'm like, what the hell just happened here? I grabbed my phone. My tweets did not go out because my Wi-Fi was not activated because it had turned off on my phone, and it was midnight, and I'm like, you know what? It's midnight on Friday night. I'm not going to wake up and go do radio with Luke right now at 1 o'clock in the morning and react to this in real time. We're going to be reacting this for a long time, aren't we? It's not about the first 15 minutes. It's now about the next literally 15 months, right? What happens here becomes its own little soap opera in a way that we've never seen before, whether it's managing this for Joe Flacco, for Lamar Jackson, for Marty Morningwig, the stakes for John Harbaugh, Ozzie Newsome outgoing. They gave away the number 2 next year. This thing is really, it's chess, it's not checkers, right, Dennis?
Oh, it certainly is, Nestor. And I was texting up with about 3 dozen of my friends on draft night, and I got to tell you, about 80% of them, they fell asleep as you did because I texted out Lamar Jackson, and they all came back like,
what?
Who got him? Who got him? I'm like, he's a Raven. And they were like, you got to be kidding.
How is that possible?
So everybody gets out of bed, turns their TV sets back on. They're seeing the purple. They're seeing the talking heads. I just had a ball. I mean, I was up until about 3 o'clock in the morning with all my buddies just texting
Everyone will say, oh, yeah, I stuck in till, 11:31 on a Friday night, and, I knew that the Ravens weren't done, and, people are going to say that, but that's not the reality of the situation.
But, you know me, though. I watched every single pick of that first round, and I was very much engaged and involved with the rest of the draft in day 2 and 3, and even into the undrafted free agents, but I thought it was a magnificent move by the Ravens for a plethora of reasons, if you will. I know a lot of our fan base didn't like the move, but I thought it was a solid, wonderful move. I think it will help sell tickets, put fannies in the seats, which I would think it's something Mr. Bushati and company would want.
Here we go, right? We're talking all about the kid that's going to carry the clipboard this year, right? And anointing him the great hope. Every team in the league passed on him, Dennis. Every team that could have taken him as their franchise quarterback said, I'll take this guy or that guy, and certainly was not in a conversation with the rest of those guys. Now, look, neither was Dak Prescott, neither was Tom Brady, right? We can go through those exceptions, but it would be the exception to the rule. And, part of this is some people in the building thought this would be good for Joe Flacco. You run a business. You understand how this works. Certainly Joe Flacco would be a guy I would think Joe Flacco was asleep. That literally, I would literally wonder how, whether Joe's home phone rang from his father or some, like how he found out that this was going down at 11:30 at night. But Joe stood in front of everybody 3 weeks ago and said, I know they're going to have another quarterback, and there's always other quarterbacks here. It's not that big a deal. Yet, the handwriting now is on the wall, and there's a $19 million cap number on him next year if they were to cut him. This is the fire being lit for him, but it's also, I guess something to discuss around here about what this looks like over the next year or two with two completely different kinds of quarterbacks and a future and a now. And they gave away a 2 now and a 2 next year that would have been there to help Joe Flacco and help the offense, and instead decided to take a flyer, literally, on controversy. Literally, that they've invited this in now. That's what we're going to hear with every 3 and out in this offense is play Lamar Jackson, right?
Well, look, they had Tyrod Taylor in the past, and he'd get 5, 6, 7 plays a game. They may try some stuff with Lamar Jackson this year. As you said, more than likely he'll carry the clipboard, but Joe Flacco was 33 years old, and what I like about the move is, say the Ravens are having a really good year, they're 8-2, and Joe Flacco gets hurt, and you've got to bring in a quarterback off of the bench to salvage the season. I like our chances better with Lamar Jackson than I would with RG3 or Ryan Mallett, for instance. So at some point you have to transition away from Joe Flacco, and the good news is Marty Mornhinweg, he was there with Michael Vick and worked very closely with him, and also Greg Roman. He was there with Colin Kaepernick. So you have two coaches who are familiar with Lamar Jackson's skill set, so to speak. So I think they can construct an offense at some point as they transition away from Joe Flacco. And look, if Joe Flacco, somebody said, what if Joe Flacco has a great year? Is that a bad thing? If Joe Flacco has a great year and the tight ends and the wide receivers, they all pan out, and Orlando Brown Jr. is lights out at right tackle, and this team goes 11-5, gets to the playoffs. Look, it's a great problem to have. It never stopped Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, and it was with Garoppolo and whoever else they had underneath of them. So to me, the best case scenario is Joe Flacco does have a great year, and this kid does carry the clipboard for a year or two, and then we'll go from there.
He is Dennis Koulatsos. He's out at Koons Ford Security Boulevard, and, of course, the SSV on WNST that you can find out on Twitter, as well as here from 3 until 5 each and every Wednesday. Of course, we can find him there the rest of the week, the other 166 hours of the week. He's over at Koons Ford Security Boulevard. Flacco, good for Joe Flacco or not good for Joe Flacco here? What if you're going to crystal ball this thing, they went out and got all these wide receivers in free agency. They loaded up on wide receivers late in the draft, tight ends throughout the draft as well. Sure. And Hayden Hurst is the forgotten guy here. The best thing that happened in this draft was probably Hayden Hurst and Orlando Brown in the near short term. I don't know if Brown's going to get on the field or not, but I know the Ravens loved him, and they drafted him. They loved him enough to pick him when he slid down the board because of the combine thing, that they didn't see it as much of a red flag to use the draft pick where they did. But, I went into this thing thinking they would go the Kyle Lauletta route, right? I thought that's where this would wind up, that that this circumstance wouldn't have been a targeted scenario for them, that they would have been looking to trade up to get a kid that some other teams don't believe in. But clearly they stuck their neck out for a couple of twos for him, thinking somehow this would make Joe better this year.
Yeah, I can't see Joe Flacco being upset about the move. Joe's a competitor. You know him better than most people in his town. Look, they got him, as you mentioned, Hayden Hurst, the best tight end in the draft. He's game ready. He's 25 years old. He has hit his ceiling. I mean, what you see is what you're going to get. There are no question marks about him. He can catch the ball. He can block. He can get downfield. They got him a tackle. They got him another tight end. They got him a couple of wide receivers. I mean, Joe Flacco has got to be elated, unlike last year when he sat there and watched the first 4 picks go to the defensive side of the ball. So I can't see Joe Flacco having any kind of problems or issues with them taking the quarterback. This is a quarterback, as you mentioned, that 31 other teams passed on. This is a quarterback that's going to be a bit of a project, if you will. I think Joe Flacco is fine. I think he's happy they've got him some more explosive weapons this year. I would think his biggest concern is, can they solidify the offensive line? Will this offensive line be stout enough? And look, with Greg Roman coming back and having the same scheme, there's no reason why this offensive line can't be dynamic. You mentioned Orlando Brown. My biggest question is, in college, he was working out of a 2-point stance. Can he put his hand in the dirt and really fire off the ball. Will he be able to make that transition? And you would hope that the Ravens will know the answer to that question. They also drafted the tight end, Mark Andrews, his teammate. So I can see them putting him next to him. Maybe he can chip. He's not a great blocker either. But, look, I like what they've done. And, Joe Flacco should be very, very happy with the type of offseason the Ravens have had thus far.
Dennis, that's what I was going to say. And I think what I've been saying most of the week is we challenge them, right, at the end of the year to say, how can it be better? Obviously, Steve Bisciotti challenged them and said, let's make this team better for everyone. And, from the time the ball went over their head, and we all felt bad about that, and we sort of knew, well, that'll be the end of Macklin, and there'll be some changes around here, and probably going to lose the center, and we knew all of that. We gauged all that. You and I talked about it twice a week during January, and then the Super Bowl comes and goes. Philadelphia wins. That's fine. Then we go to the Combine, and we're talking about, Ridley and Orlando Brown being that piece at 16, and in sort of a traditional tone of they're going to have 7 draft picks. They're going to pick at 16. They'll get a supplemental of some kind. Usually that's better news than bad news. This year it was bad news here. And then free agency opens, and they didn't go out and get crazy and spend money on a Robinson or, the Jarvis Landry thing. The fans chased that for 20 minutes, right? But in the end, everything they did from the minute the gate opened, the minute the store opened on Black Friday and the shopping went crazy, right, to the point where we are today, this is a veteran, established, had great drafts and have had bad drafts. They've been good, they've been bad, they've been ugly, but they've never been in last place, right? And they've never been horrible. And this was their concession, I think, on Thursday night to say, we don't ever want to be bad enough to be able to pick Josh Darnold, right? I mean, we don't ever want to have to pick third in the draft. And this was sort of a meeting of the halfway where if you believe giving up 2 twos to bring in this kid and let him run around behind a quarterback who's already won a Super Bowl, and we'll deal with whatever the personal fallout is inside professionally and 2 different offenses, and whether this kid will really want to be a weapon or not. Like, if the only way he's going to get on the field this year is to be a wide receiver or a gadget guy or, whatever that thing, throw the ball to Flacco in the back of the end zone, whatever that thing's going to be, I don't know the kid to know whether he's going to be happy with all that and how that's going to work out. But everything they've brought together here, from bringing the wide receivers in to the way they've managed the cap to where they are right now, Brandon Williams and C.J. Mosley still on the team and Stanley on the team. I saw a healthy Alex Lewis down at the Harbor on Saturday. They bring in a tight end. The running backs doing the Irish jig here in the offseason. We're having some fun. It feels like secondary isn't something that they're bleeding for. Like for 5 years, all we talked about was fix the secondary. They wound up taking a corner in the 4th round again and a safety later on. They wheeled and dealed all these picks back. I don't know how you can be upset if you're a Ravens fan right now and say that, all this Ozzie sucks and Harbaugh sucks and Flacco sucks. I mean, I'm on all the Facebook and Twitter, and I see all that too. But professionally, 4 months into this thing, everyone tipped their cap to Ozzie Newsome for a reason, because he began this thing a week ago with the 16th pick in the draft and comes home with 12 kids, right, and a quarterback, and 4 first 2-day picks, and 3 guys that were considered pretty blue chippy in Hurst, Jackson, and Brown. And there are a lot of people that like Andrews more than they like Hurst. So, I have nothing to complain about. I'm sending my PSL money in, but they check all the boxes for me for trying hard, right?
Absolutely, Nestor. I think the big word about this draft is potential. Nobody downgraded this draft. Nobody said it was a terrible draft for the Ravens. It's a draft, boom with potential. If all these players, if half of them, if a third of them, if they pan out, it would have been a great draft. You mentioned the secondary. Anthony Averett, I watch a lot of Alabama football. I love Nick Saban. In 2016, he lined up across from Marlon Humphrey. This is a very, very under the radar cornerback, ran at 4.36. Their defensive backfield with Tavon Young coming back, Nestor, has a shot to be really lights out. And you made a great point. This team is always going to compete. And if they're healthy, they have a shot to get in the playoffs. They're never going to be 4-12. They'll never pick first or second overall in the draft. And I think that's something that's lost upon our fan base when we get frustrated. They're always going to be in a conversation. They retool them, never rebuild, and that's a credit to Steve Bisciotti and the front office, that they're always in contention. I'm very happy with the draft, but no one knows. There's no such thing as a short draft pick, right? No, can't miss player. Players miss all the time. If they can be 50% effective out of 12 players, you got to be kidding me. I'm very excited. Like you, I'm turning in my PSL money. I'm planning on more than one game this year. I'm very excited. Hopefully the stench of last year, we can get it out of our system, whether it be the knee or the way they finish up the season against the Bengals. And I'm very, very excited for the opener against the Buffalo Bills.
They are an improved team, right? We could all sit here and look at this and say, they needed to get better. They wanted to get better, and they're trying to get better. And, for that, I don't know what else we can add. We could sit here and talk about the Orioles, couldn't we?
No, but yeah, exactly. Look at the top three receivers from last year, right? Macklin's not playing ball right now unless he signed over the weekend. Ben Watson signs for a minimum deal for the Saints, and Mike Wallace gets a $2.5 million one-year deal with the Eagles. So their top three receivers got nothing. It goes to show you how poor their offense was, how few weapons Joe Flacco had. So now Flacco has potentially a lot better weapons than he had a year ago. He's healthier. He has to be feeling better. And I think they're going to go as Joe goes. Joe has a really good year. This team can get back in the playoffs. Make no mistake about it.
Does Flacco have the right to be pissed about how this has gone with them spending money around him and sitting around on draft nights and watching them get him no help and then sitting around on Friday night and watching them get his replacement as well? There will be a perception that he's pissed whether he is or isn't, and I literally don't know. I haven't talked to Joe. I got within 20 feet of him down at the Harbor on Saturday when I was walking over to the Brigade game, and I know you watched the Brigade game too. I'll let you throw down on that, but does Flacco have a beef here that they gave away the 2 last year and the 2 this year to replace him instead of making the offense better? And I think that's a fair charge, and it's a charge Luke had brought out long before the draft, and I think something we've talked about around here, that they really have committed not a lot of their resources to the offense and have kind of blamed Flacco for it in the end.
Well, they have tried, though, Nestor, but Rashard Perriman, Max Williams, and it goes on and on. They have tried to get him some weapons. The weapons haven't panned out. I think last year he had a right to be upset because, again, the first 4 picks that they made were on the defensive side of the ball. So Dean Pease was very happy, but Joe Flacco and Marty Mornhinweg and Greg Roman, they couldn't have been elated. So this year they have invested back into that offense. And also, if you're paying me $25 million a year, Nestor, I'm going to have the greatest attitude, the best work ethic. I don't make that kind of money, but I can't imagine with his portfolio that he's going to be that upset about anything under any circumstance. He's always been cool. His demeanor, his personality, I don't think he gets rattled too often. He's a multi-millionaire at the end of the day.
But if he doesn't stink, this kid will never get on the field, right? Like I mean, if you're giving me $1 right now and asking me if Lamar Jackson is going to hand the Lombardi Trophy to Eric DeCosta, if that's ever going to happen, if you're going to ask me, I would have to bet against that, not on that. I know how hard that is to do, right? In the same way that the day they fired Billick and said, will the next guy win the Lombardi Trophy, I would have bet against that. I did bet against that publicly because it's very, very hard to do. So the one guy got a trophy. The one guy got into the playoffs his first 5 years in the league. If this kid did that, forget winning the Super Bowl. If this kid could get them into the playoffs 2 or 3 times, for what they've spent on him draft pick. This isn't Andrew Luck here. This isn't Peyton Manning, right? No. And I know he's going to be talked about around here like he is Deshaun Watson or that he is Michael Vick. He's not Michael Vick. Michael Vick was, it's a different thing. And I think the backup quarterback always becomes the favorite guy in town, especially where they've already had a problem with Joe Flacco around here for whatever. All the guy's ever done is win here and stay healthy until he wasn't healthy with his knee a couple of years ago. And I'll hear that he's 33 and that guys of his body size and mobility and all of those things that happen. But I can also point to Drew Brees and Tom Brady right now and Roethlisberger and Phillip Rivers and say, I don't know, man. I don't know that you're being fair judging Joe Flacco on a bad back and a busted up leg and a crappy cast around him. Crappy at various points. Literally crappy outside of Marshall Yonda for the most part. Like literally. And Steve Smith for 5 minutes, the first 8 weeks of all 3 years. So for me, I'm not saying Flacco would ever be angry, but I'm saying that there was lost opportunity here. And if you're betting on this kid being the savior of the franchise, which he will be because he's going to carry a clipboard, right? That I know where that heads, and that's something Harbaugh has never had to deal with around here. Certainly, the franchise hasn't dealt with that kind of noise because Flacco got right on the field right away, right?
Absolutely, but you know what? I think getting Lamar Jackson at the point in the draft that they did just represents just a wonderful insurance policy for them, if nothing else, a better option at backup quarterback for Joe Flacco. And somebody also says that the first time Joe Flacco throws a pick, the fan base is going to start chanting Lamar Jackson's name.
Of course.
Well, guess what? If RG3 was a backup and Flacco did the same thing, if he threw 2 or 3 picks in a game, they would start chanting for RG3's name too. That's just the nature of the business. It's the nature of the game, the fan base, how fickle we can be at times. It doesn't matter who backs up, right? The backup quarterback is the most popular guy in town until he has to play. Then all of a sudden, the spotlight's on him. I mean, how many guys were thought to be better than Joe Flacco or his backups, and none of it has proven to be true. I mean, Tyrod Taylor has done a decent job, but he does not have a ring, right? So, and he may lose his job this year with the Browns. The best case scenario for this franchise is Joe Flacco does real well the next year or two, gets us another Super Bowl, and wants to sign another 5-year contract, and then you could trade Lamar Jackson for some equity, right, if he's sitting there. Joe, if you go the other opposite direction, say Joe gets hurt, doesn't play well, at least the Ravens have a viable option, even if they have to change the entire offense. This is nothing new to this franchise. Tyrod Taylor was a different quarterback than Joe Flacco. When he came into the game, they had to change the offense to fit his strengths as well. But Lamar's a little bit taller, the most electrifying college football player of the last 2 years. I think it was a dynamic move, a bold move. And you know what? No guts, no glory, Nestor. They got to roll the dice, and I think it was well worth the roll.
All right, we will be following you and hearing all of your extended observations about all these draft picks and the Caps. And I know you watched the Brigade play over the weekend. I went down to the Brigade game Saturday. Friday, Ron Jaworski's going to be here this week. His team is the Philadelphia Soul of the Arena Football League. They're coming in to play the Brigade on Friday night. So we'll have Jaws here, and I'm sure he'll have some things to say as a business partner on the golf course with Joe Flacco up there in New Jersey as well. But indoor football, man, that Hippert kid can throw it around, and a lot of scoring, a lot of want. They're playing real football out there, man. I mean, it was more. It was interesting to me in a way because there's no punting. Trying to figure out the rules when you're there watching the game, it's kind of fun. It's kind of like trying to figure out cricket or something. You know, you really are kind of paying attention to what's going on because you're trying to learn.
Yeah, it was almost like a rugby match. The same kind of feel, same kind of vibe. What's going on? But what's clear is the players are vested in the game. They really do care. There was a near brawl at the end of the game, but it was very entertaining. If you like scoring and limited defense, this was like watching the Chargers and the Dolphins back in the day in the NFL. But I saw you on Twitter. I saw you were having a great time. You caught a ball. You were gracious enough to give it to a young fan. And it looks like they had more fans there than a typical Orioles game lately, too.
You know, someone asked me, and people were there, and I'd say, you know what? It's been a long time since the Skipjacks, but I would say it felt like a Tuesday night Binghamton game against the Skipjacks, but I think that the Skipjacks had more people than they had there on Saturday. There were a lot of Raven jerseys there because the draft party was downtown, and that was kind of a unique sort of thing for them to do. They know they have a lot of work to do. They're trying to keep the league alive, but I'll say this, very competitive football. I mean, it's not crappy football by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, these guys have been doing this for a decade. They need to build a fan base around them. There's no doubt about that. But it's real football, and that kid Hippert has a skill. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it was very, very entertaining, and I was jonesing for football anyway, so I was flipping channel. First I saw you, and like, where's the game at? And I was able to find the game. It was very entertaining, and I wish I was there. It looks like you guys are having the ball. Yeah,
we had a good time. Good time, man. Friday night, they're doing it again, the Philadelphia Soul. Tell everybody what's going on at Koons Ford Security Boulevard out there, Dennis, before I let you go.
Hey, great deals over here at Koons Ford of Baltimore. Still a lot of incentives on the hood of the cars. Still can get 0% for 72 months. Explorers, F-150s, convertible Mustangs. It's that time of the year again. And don't worry about all the media hype about Ford getting down to 2 cars. They're going to enhance their lineup, more SUVs. There's more space for them to do some creative things with. So we're very excited about the future of Ford Motor Company. We've got the new Bronco coming, the Ranger's coming back. Lots of great products, great outlook for Ford Motor Company. like the Ravens, the outlook is optimistic.
Dennis, when I heard that news last week, you know what I said to my wife? I said, what difference does it make? All the cars are going to be driving themselves. I mean, like that's a very hard concept, right? Like that I'm trying to get into my brain as I sit here and broadcast on video to the whole world on this crazy thing, and we all take all of this Twitter, all this stuff for granted, right? The connectivity of all of this. The notion that any of these cars are ever going to be the way they used to be, or that Ford or any other motor car is going to operate the same way that they did in 1978, and you're going into a whole different way in the way my business, the media business, that we're never going to read a newspaper again, right? And that was still a very hard concept for people to read newspapers every morning, right?
Sure.
And feel that. But the car thing for me, anytime I hear this shake-up news, I'm like, pump the brakes, literally, chill out. These cars are going to drive themselves. That's where this thing is headed.
Now, I tell my friends when they say, how's the car business? I tell them, you start worrying. When you start seeing people walking on highways instead of cars, then you worry about me. Until then, the car business is fine.
I want the first car that's going to drive me everywhere to let me get a lot more work done, Dan. You know what I mean?
Consider it done.
And I'll probably be going to New York more often to see Billy Joel or something, too. See you soon, bud. There he goes. Dennis Koulatsos, or Barry Manilow, for that matter, at Wolf Trap.
There you go.
And think of the fun we could have if we didn't have to drive ourselves.
Yeah, you can have a few more beverages.
And entertainment in all sorts of ways, man. There he goes. Dennis Koulatsos joining us here. It's Koons Ford, Security Boulevard. You can find him SSV on WNST as well. Woo, man. Draft picks, lots to talk about. Ozzie, Lamar Jackson, Joe Flacco, Hayden Hurst. The guy we're talking the most about isn't even the guy that was drafted first. It's crazy. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports